This is Kimberly Quinn, host of the Mindcraft podcast, and I can't tell you how much fun I have had doing this podcast. I started when the world closed over the pandemic in an attempt to spread some positivity out there and give people some strategies to enhance their own well being and reduce anxiety and all of that. Now, 2 years later, we're still going strong and now listened to by 52 countries across the world. And I've even helped some of my students get going with their own podcasts. It's super easy to do. And I'll tell you, if you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, it is the easiest way to make a podcast with everything you need all in one place. I'll just explain for you. Anchor has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. When hosting on Anchor, you can distribute your podcast on listening platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. And best of all, Anchor is totally free. Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. It is a ball. Start today. Greetings, Minecrafters, and welcome to another Minecraft discussion on this lovely July morning. This is Kimberly Quinn, and I am thrilled to have a conversation with you again about how we are wired for spirituality. And based on that, I've been reading this book by Lisa Miller called The Awakened Brain, and I've just added to my list of great teachers. She's just amazing. Today, though, we're going to take this past what we were talking about last time as far as depression and spirituality basically being two sides of the same coin, and we're going to go into the modes of awareness, of which there are two. And so first, talking about Lisa's research again, just reminding everyone what the difference between an MRI is and a little fMRI, because it's important for what we're talking about. So the MRI is a big coffin-shaped thing that's claustrophobic, and if you blow out, an ankle or a knee playing soccer, volleyball in the backyard or whatever, that's how they tell, where the rips are and the ligaments and tendons and such like that. Whereas an fMRI with a little f in the front in italics measures blood flow. It measures activity, actual movement in the brain. So obviously the more movement, the more activity there is, the more oxygen is consumed, heat's produced, blah, blah, blah. So that's what the fMRI tracks. It tracks actual activity. And when there's lots of activity, the fire colors will kind of show on the scan, the reds and the yellows and the oranges. And so, Lisa wanted to jump in, and she wanted to jump in with young adults. I believe they were the ages from 18 to 27. And this because we would call this late adolescence. We mentioned that before. And I explain this to my students, and I do a disclaimer of it's not meant to be condescending. It's not saying, you're acting like teenagers or something. However, from a brain standpoint, from a neurological standpoint, the prefrontal cortex is not fully developed in either genetic males or genetic females until the age of 25. So there's lots happening, neurologically speaking, because they're really half-baked bread or two-thirds baked bread. And so, obviously, Lisa's aware of this. And so she wanted to, work with participants who were 18 to 27, considered, neurologically speaking, in late adolescence. And late adolescence is also when, the highest degree, percentage or whatever of the onset for most mental illnesses. This is when it happens. The depression, the anxiety, all that stuff in the sort of traditional college years is when most of this stuff surfaces. This is also when spirituality often deepens. And so what a great, there's a loud bird over there. She's singing a beautiful note. And I'm outside on the deck. You can probably hear the nature sounds out here. It's very nice. So depression and spirituality both can kind of take off during this time frame. So what a great time to really measure this, and as far as research goes. And so what she did was she had these young adult participants describe three narratives, and one with the fMRI on, obviously, one stressful event, one relaxing event, and one spiritual experience, and with as much detail as possible. And so the results were about that half of the spiritual recollections or narratives included such things such as prayer or experience that happened during a religious service. And then there also was a lot of sort of reporting or emphasis on sounds, such as bells, singing, or singing of prayers. And I have to tell you, I have a student who, just this past semester, she was very into sound bells. I think her father gave them to her for her birthday. And she was a first year, or is a, or now she's a second year, aspiring second year. Lovely young lady. And she offered to do them for her classmates for our mindfulness minute in the beginning of class. And she also did it at the Defense Against Dark Arts Club that I run. And I always knew sound was obviously very therapeutic, very calming. And also, when she did that, because I experienced this lots because she came into each class and came into several defense club meetings, and it really does, just the vibration really is spiritual. I felt it. Even in the room with, 18 students, I felt it really does kind of move the spirit, as they say, without seeming cliche. So I get that. Okay, now this is totally cool. Okay, so we had the half that talked about just including with what when they felt spiritual, they reported some sort of prayer. We're not talking about denominational organized anything. Some talked about religious service though, but that's not the focus. And some talked about the different sounds. Now, excuse me, this is totally cool. The other half of these young adults talked about the barrier between self and others, or self and the world, right? Or this brick wall between self and the world. And they talked about this spiritual experience as just melting this wall away. And that is so cool. And if you remember with the last episode, we are talking about the certain areas of the brain, and specifically Lisa looked. So she's looking at perception, orientation, and then reflection. So we talked about the occipital lobe, which is in the back of the head, responsible for kind of integrating our visual sensory experience into something we can quote unquote see, right? And then the parietal lobe is all about sort of spatial orientation. So we talked about it's actually what's mainly happening when we're trying to parallel park, not clipping the person in front of us or behind us. But the precuneus part of the parietal lobe is also responsible for reflection. And the parietal lobe also connects us, our inner life, to what's going on around us in the external world. This is very important. It's like making the bridge between what's going on the inside and what's going on the outside, and enables us to see the bigger picture of how we fit in the world. Okay, so this is totally cool and something I can definitely relate to myself, is that the roughly other half of the personal narratives about the spiritual experience that did not involve the prayer, or like a religious service or something like that, were like heavy on the nature experience, spiritual awareness in nature, like the mountains, or being in the woods, bodies of water such as the beach, or even in an urban area, a pond. You can be in Central Park and take in nature, right? And so all these narratives also included like sometimes light, starry nights, bluebird skies, just all that sort of thing. And the message reported by these young adults was that you are a part of everything around you, and it is all a part of you. That's what Lisa Miller says. You're linked with the trees, the rocks, the mountains, and the sky. You are just a speck in the universe, yet the universe is all within you. And that's just awesome. And so there you have it, these spiritual experiences, and they're measured on the little fMRI scan. Beautiful. And then Lisa talks about so we had like almost half with the prayer and religious service experience, and then the almost other half talking about just the whole nature thing with the sky and the mountains and all that. And then there were a few that didn't really mention either one of those too much, but were more focused on the feeling of transcendence that they felt, um, like at a sporting event, or immersed in music or something like that. And again, the emphasis was on the feeling or experience of being a part of something larger that went beyond the body. into like talking about the sporting event, like a cheering crowd and the roar of that. Or I'm thinking when our daughter and I ran a marathon with just these strangers, never going to see them again, more than likely, right? Just yipping for you and everything like that. You really do feel such a crazy connection. And then the other one with music, I've heard that a lot from people. My students talk about the music thing actually, but the idea of transcending, right? Meaning rising above and entering into this realm of a sensation of being part of something bigger than all of us is awesome. Okay, so I'm just going to read this quick little excerpt from Lisa Miller's book. Remember, it's called The Awakened Brain. She's now one of my new great teachers added to the list. So Lisa says, she says, no matter whether the spiritual experience was secular or religious, whether it took place indoors or in nature, in solitude or with others, all of the spiritual narratives shared important themes and physical sensations. Physically, the participants felt warm, calm, energized, and more alive. Their hearts beat faster, their senses sharpened, their nagging thoughts disappeared. Emotionally, they experienced clarity, awe, openness, peace, and unity, and felt a powerful sensation with and sometimes overwhelming love for other people, a higher power, or their surroundings. That I just love that. That's what we're talking about. This transcendent feeling, which is also, and it's just amazing how these brilliant minds think alike. Abraham Maslow in his pyramid of needs, hierarchy of needs, his very top one is transcendence of self. He has the self-actualization as one before that, coming into how we fit in the world, blah, blah, blah. And then it's the transcendent piece where we realize that's the top pinnacle of the hierarchy of needs is to, so I like how he also says needs, Abraham Maslow, because we need to feel as if we are part of something bigger. That's what we're talking about here. It also, when we realize there's a higher power, creator of all things, source of the capital S, whatever you want to call that universe, it also takes the pressure off. Okay, so then Lisa continues, boundaries dissolved. It wasn't just that they felt a sense of ease or peace or of an absence of pain or agitation. It wasn't just that it was a nice day or the sun was out and the flowers smelled good and they felt happy. There was a specific meaning attached to the physical and emotional experience, a feeling of oneness with the environment or the divine, a sense of their own individual voice or identity or presence dissolving into something larger around or beyond them. They narrated direct felt experiences of oneness, moments in which they had an awareness of moving from a point to a wave. I love that. Moving from a point to a wave. And they narrated an attentional pop of awareness, moments of sudden guidance when a problem or conflict or question resolved in an insight or realization. See, I love that. And my friend Tom, I've talked about him a lot with his work on synchronicity, because once we sort of get it, really get it, that we're all connected in a divine sense. Again, I'm not talking about organized religion. I'm talking about realizing, that there's a universal energy source, right? A higher power. Once we actually get that, the green lights really start to show up. And my friend Tom talks about the green lights as being um, providing guidance. Like, okay, like it's if you've ever had that experience just out there in regular life, you have these moments of synchronicity or serendipity where you just know you're meant to talk to that person, you're meant to go this direction, you're meant to show up at that coffee shop. You just feel it. You're not thinking about it, you just feel it. And from whatever that experience is or whatever, being pointed in that direction, out comes something that was good for you, and you just had this aha moment that you were meant to be there in that place at exactly that time. And it's only when we get that we are part of this divine connection do those green lights start to show up. And also there's red lights, but we'll get to that later. So then Lisa says, I'll just repeat this last one. They had a pop of awareness, moments of sudden guidance when a problem or conflict or question resolved in an insight or realization. And then she has in quotes, and then I realized that I'm held and God has a plan for me. And suddenly I knew that I'm part of all life and that I will find my direction and that I will find my direction. And so A lot of I just oh my god, I just love this book. And so Lisa Miller, basically and her team found out that whether these young adults had this, engaged spiritual experience in an actual, church or temple service, whatever organized religious service, or I'm thinking of myself on the chairlift. Oh my God, I feel so spiritual on the chairlift, and also in the trees skiing, also in church for me. And wow, do I feel at home in Winter Wonderland? I'm a winter person, and I just feel part of the trees, part of the snow, part of my skis, part of everything, and the silence is almost loud. I can't even explain it, but she found that whether it's like that in nature, like a cathedral of nature, which in those of us skiers who ski the trees, we call it the canopy effect, and it's just the most gorgeous, church or temple ever, or whether they had a structured thing that it was really they're all saying the same things as far as what it felt like, that we felt a certain belonging, a certain oneness with the universe, source, God, however you want to say it. And I love how this too, Lisa talks about it being a matter of choice. And the times when people don't like when I say that about happiness, too, and that you don't understand. Yes, I do. The thing is, no matter how we are wired, and we are all wired differently, and some of us who have something extra to deal with. I myself am a card carrying member of the Fast Mind Club, and it certainly takes more effort on some days than others. It still comes right down to it. And she talks about her research. There are people from different socioeconomic backgrounds and genetics and family and environment and IQ and this and that and that and this and whatever. And that when it comes down to it, it mattered what the participants saw and sort of how they experienced the whole thing and how they sort of grabbed the reins on their own inner life. So by making a choice, a perceptual choice, this same participant, this young adult, could either be awake, experiencing this wonderful spiritual awakened brain, or be really strung out. Okay, and so Lisa Miller, she is totally added on my list of people that I really, really, really want to have a lengthy lunch with. Oh my gosh, I would just love to have such a conversation with her. Okay, so there are two modes of awareness of the awakened brain. There are two modes. And what's interesting is we do need them both. We just have to kind of keep a handle I keep a handle on both of them. And the first one is called, Elisa calls it achieving awareness. And that sort of is about the perception um, that our purpose is to kind of have some organization and gain control over our lives. So when she talks about that, like when we live through this mode of awareness, achieving awareness, that our basic, more foundational concern is about the question of how can I how can I get and keep what I want? That's really what it's about. And this mode of awareness is obviously very useful, very practical, and often necessary. It sort of provides us with focus, like a focused attention and commitment, the commitment that's necessary to achieve goals and to allow ourselves to like kind of direct our engagement and attention and energy to a specific task. Like an example what she has here is like to study for an exam or finish a project, or to jump in the car and get someplace on time, or to rehearse or practice a skill. That we need the achievement awareness, to kind of do the world basically. And now this is important because we need the achieving awareness. We need the achievement awareness. And it's also important to realize that when it's overused, like kind of like when we lean too heavily on achievement awareness, and using it sort of exclusively, that this can override and change the actual structure of the brain, which is obviously not what we want. Carving the pathways for one to be depressed and maybe anxious. Of course, anxiety and depression go together like peas and carrots, or to carve the way for stress and craving, actually. So when this is out of whack, achieving awareness can be narrowly focused and sort of derail us from the bigger picture. Become kind of making us become obsessed with same track thinking, and ideas, also help are contributing to sort of this place of never feeling satisfied, as well as loneliness and isolation. That's huge. At least in the US right now, loneliness is actually an epidemic, right? Epidemic, right up there with heart disease and obesity and smoking as far as the cause of death. So it's important to keep this in check. And it's also important to realize that when we get sort of sucked into to staying in the mode of achieving awareness for too long, that this can sort of cause a a problem, because we get as Lisa puts it, like this very inflated sense of control. And we've talked about this a lot in other episodes, that control is really an illusion. It's really one big illusion. My friend Biana talks about that a lot. And what happens is when we get hooked into this illusion of control and overinflated sense of control, we can become disconnected from everybody else around us, or she says, like, the heartbeat of everybody else around us, which is almost poetic. So she even says overblown, it becomes craving and addiction, and that we can need a bigger dose of whatever it is to feel good, and that no amount of control or success is going to get rid of the craving. I mean, it's very, very important to have a handle on this, because we need it, yet we don't want to reside there. And then Lisa Miller of the Awakened Brain moves into the awakened awareness, which is just so cool. And she says when we engage the awakened brain, right, the awakened awareness, this is how we make sense of the different parts of our brain. She says that we can literally sort of I guess our I want to say vision, like metaphorically speaking, but it's not really metaphorically speaking, it's real, that we can actually see more. Kind of when we engage this part of this awakened awareness, we are better able to integrate information from multiple sources that are coming through our perceptual pathways. So therefore, instead of seeing ourselves as these, solo makers of our journeys, we begin to see ourselves as seekers along the journey or path. And that we look across this, broad landscape, and kind of ask this question, um what is the universe or life trying to show me now? What's going on? And so what we're talking about is, like, this awakened awareness is so huge, because I'm thinking of my friend Tom again with the synchronicity stuff. Once the brain, or we tap into, because again, we're all wired for it, right? That's the whole point of this episode in her book. We're all wired for it. So once we kind of get that and engage with it and tap into it, that's when the green lights, as we were talking about earlier, start to show up, which means we're able to then perceive or see more choices, more opportunities that are available to us. And mega important is that it becomes very, very clear on a million levels about how we are so connected to each other. We're not just a bunch of islands, like way out there in the deep end of the ocean, that we are all connected to each other. And we also, remember the cortical thickening we talked about, right? Because the awakened brain has a thick cortex, and that also is one of the parts of the brain that makes the bridge between our inner lives and the external world, right? So we can then piece together and figure out where we fit in the big schema of things, and it becomes so much more clear. We begin to creativity can soar. We get all kinds of insight just kind of lands in our lap, and imagination. And probably the hugest thing is we can really tap into our own authentic purpose and meaning that is unique to us. So the bullets in bold here is that we need both of them. We need achievement awareness, and we need awakened awareness. And again, with the awakened awareness, we kind of get it, that we are basically, just woven. I think she says woven into this fabric of universal divine knowledge, and that we are never ever really alone. We can feel like that. We need to shift into a place of engagement, because we are not alone. We're absolutely not. And then she talks about how the team, was kind of able to see that spiritual awakening is a choice, just like I talk with my students about with happiness. Happiness is also a choice, and that we can make a choice we can make at every single moment, with every single one of our life minutes. There can be a choice to be spiritually awake, a choice of how we perceive ourselves and how we fit in this wonderful world we live in. Excellent. Okay, 2 modes of awareness: achievement awareness and awakened awareness. Awesome. This is Kimberly Quinn signing off for Northern Vermont. Have a mindful day.